ahead and get started.
I am. Thank you, Christina.
Okay, sure. So again, welcome everybody. My name is Christina Medved and I'm with the Roaring Fork Conservancy. And we want to thank you all for being here tonight for Steve Hunter's presentation on the Grizzly Creek Wildfire, estimating post-fire watershed response. And so before we get started tonight, I just wanted to go ahead and take the opportunity to welcome all of you here. We have people on this call from all over the state of Colorado, but also Ohio, Pennsylvania, Washington State, Minnesota, and California. So welcome. If you have an opportunity to, in the chat box, can you please let me know how you all found out about this presentation? It just helps us with future PR to understand how the word got out, because we have reached such a far-reaching audience. It's really helpful for us. So thank you. So because there are so many of you that are new to Roaring Fork Conservancy, I just wanted to take a brief moment to just let you know where we are and a little bit about the work that we do. So this is a picture of the state of Colorado. This section in blue right here is the Roaring Fork Watershed, and that is the focus of our organization and the work that we do. We are on the western slope of Colorado. And so the Roaring Fork Conservancy is about a 24-year-old organization. We'll turn 25 at the end of this year. And our mission is pretty simple. We want to inspire individuals to explore, value, and protect the Roaring Fork watershed. And we primarily do this through our watershed education programs, everything from kindergarten to college to families and adult programming throughout the year. We actually reach about close to 6,000 individuals a year, and Megan Dean, our Director of Education, is on this call, so maybe she can give you a little wave so you can all see her if you haven't already met her in person. And then the other way we fulfill our mission is through our watershed science and policy programs, and that includes everything from water quality monitoring to doing some policy work with all the different stakeholders that are in our watershed. And so I bring this up because as we are on the western slope of Colorado, the Roaring Fork watershed is actually a very important headwater tributary to the Colorado River. So is the Colorado River watershed, as enormous as it is, our watershed is only about 0.5% of the total land mass, but we contribute about 10% of the total flow to the Colorado River. And so it was several years ago that one of our organization's friends and donors, the Carter and Dane Brookshire, came up with this idea for the Watershed Institute. And the idea is that we would invite water leaders from around the state, around the region, nationally, to come and talk about relevant water issues. And so that the public and professionals, all of you that are on this call, would have an opportunity for one-on-one dialogue with these water leaders, such as Steve. And so I'm going to go ahead, before we get started with Steve's presentation, to admit the remaining folks that joined and are in our waiting room. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing right now. And as we do that, Steve's going to go ahead and get ready to share his screen. And for those of you that will have questions tonight, we're really happy to try to answer all of your questions tonight. Please enter your questions in the chat box, and I will be moderating that while Steve is presenting. And we'll either interrupt Steve during his slide to ask the question, or we'll wait until the end, but we will get to your questions. So on that note,
can you see that PowerPoint, Christina?
Yes.
Okay.
It looks good. So
Fantastic.
let's go ahead and introduce you all to Steve, and then Steve can tell you a little bit more about the specific work he has done on the Grizzly Creek Wildfire. So Steve Hunter is a professional hydrologic engineer and hydrologist, and Steve recently started with the City of Aspen Water Department as the Utility Resource Manager after 11 years with the U.S. Forest Service. Steve was the Burned Area Emergency Response Coordinator and Specialist on the White River National Forest, and Steve still works with the U.S. Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management on wildfires. So he's going to tell you about all the work that he did on this specific fire. And on that note, Steve, I turn the microphone over to you. Thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Christina and Megan, and thanks everybody tonight to join us for a little discussion on the Grizzly Creek Wildfire. Like Christina said, I was the BAER coordinator and specialist on the White River, was on the BAER teams for all the fires we had locally here, including Lake Christine in 2018. I was a READ, or a resource advisor, working with the USGS and some other researchers from Utah State University which I'll talk to about tonight later in the presentation. So with that, we'll kick it off. I think, there we go. So a quick presentation outline, just to give you an idea of what we're going to cover tonight. I want to talk to you a little bit about the 2020 drought and wildfire season, kind of a little recap. And then we'll talk a little about the Grizzly Creek Fire wildfire statistics. Then we'll move into the bulk of the presentation, which is going to be on the 3 phases of post-wildfire restoration and recovery. And that includes suppression repair, burned area emergency response, or BAER, long-term restoration and repair. And throughout the discussion tonight, we're going to have a smattering of post-wildfire science and watershed response to not only the Grizzly Creek fire, but other fires. And then we'll end the presentation tonight talking about ongoing research on the Grizzly Creek fire and long-term restoration and monitoring. So the 2020 drought, and for those of you who were in the West and in Colorado, you're well aware of the 2020 drought as well as the 2018 drought. In 2020, we started with an average snowpack that basically melted out a couple weeks early due to extremely warm temperatures, below average precipitation that we never really recovered from. We also went into the 2019-2020 year with low soil moisture. So of that snowpack, a lot of it got sucked up by very dry soils. Those above average temperatures and below average precipitation proceeded or continued, excuse me, through the spring, summer, fall, and even to this day as we give this presentation. We also had an inactive North American monsoon that can help contribute a little to Colorado. It's not a big player as it is in the Southwest, like Arizona, New Mexico, but we did have an inactive monsoon both in 2019 and 2020. The state of Colorado recorded its 3rd driest or 3rd warmest summer on record, and the states of California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado all recorded their warmest August on record. A moderate La Nina developed in August of 2020, and a La Nina can be a little tricky for Colorado. Basically, a La Nina pattern will favor greater precipitation for the northern Rockies and the Pacific Northwest, and less precipitation for southwest United States. And Colorado tends to be on a transition zone, so it can be a little tricky. Right now, recent snow has helped significantly, but we still have a ways to go if we're going to recover from drought conditions. 2020 wildfire season. Once again, if you were here, what an epic wildfire season. So the state of Colorado saw 3 of the state's largest wildfires in history. These were all mega fires. And by mega fires, it's any fire that's greater than 100,000 acres in size. These fires include the Cameron Peak Fire, which is over 208,000 acres, the East Troublesome Fire at almost 194,000 acres, the Pine Gulch Fire right outside of Grand Junction, Colorado at just shy of 140,000 acres. And you can even count the Mullen Fire, which originated in the state of Wyoming, but then crossed the border at just south of 180,000 acres when it was contained. So the Grizzly Creek wildfire, and let me move that little cursor, sorry, I'll be using that later. So it was one of the nation's top priorities in wildfires in 2020, and that was due to the fact of the homes, the businesses, and the critical infrastructure, including I-70, that was closed down for 2 weeks during this fire. Fairly significant infrastructure and property in this fire. The size, a little over 32,000 acres. So in the big scheme of 2020 fires, in that mega fire realm, it was not there in size, but it was there in complexity. The date of ignition was August 10th. It was deemed human caused. And the area of origin of was 1 mile east of Glenwood Springs, Colorado. Once again, many call this like the infrastructure fire. There was a lot of properties, homes, businesses. You have I-70, and for those out of state, the Colorado Department of Transportation and all their associated infrastructure, including tunnels that go under different mountain ranges. You have the Union Pacific Railroad that parallels the Colorado River, and then I-70 also in there. We have the Shoshone Power Plant, associated power lines. We have a great amount of natural resources in there, including the Colorado River, Hanging Lake, beautiful creeks, trails, recreation opportunities, and it's also the water supply for the city of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, just to the west. And suppression costs of Grizzly Creek were in excess of $36 million. So the three phases of wildfire restoration and recovery, we're going to talk about suppression repair, burned area emergency response of BAER, you may have heard of BAER teams, and then long-term restoration and repair. So suppression repair, what is it? Well, when you're fighting a wildfire, there is a lot of activity that is not the most friendly to the natural environment. Their primary mission is the health and safety of not only the firefighters, but also property, adjacent property owners, and natural resources, including life and property. So some damage occurs to the natural environment, and the Forest Service, BLM, and others try to minimize that during suppression efforts. But inevitably, there's going to be some repair that needs to be done, and that's where suppression repair comes in. And it starts occurring as the fire's winding down. It accounts for all fire line activity repair, which includes hand lines, dozer or cat lines. That top right photo is a dozer line, staging areas, drop points, landing zones, safety zones, fire camps, roads and trails, to name a few. Suppression repair impacts. Well, they can lead to altered drainage paths, loss of vegetative cover and duff. That leads to increased erosion and sedimentation of streams and other water bodies. Heavy equipment leads to soil compaction. Equipment, both leaking and or refueling stations, even though they try to have containment and all that, you can get soil contamination from that. Retardant drops near and in water bodies. All that's recorded, but some of that may or may not need to be addressed. The photo on the right here, see my little laser pointer, that's a cat or a dozer line. You can see the fire came up this ridge, and this did what it was supposed to do. The fire did not jump over into this adjacent watershed. But this area where the fire this will come back quicker on its own than this dozer line will. So we have to go in there and give it a little help. So the crew formulates a suppression repair plan, and this is early on in the fire, to minimize damage as suppression occurs, and then during suppression repair. So it's developed by resource advisors. Resource advisors, or READs, as we like to call them, are Forest Service or BLM professionals that are fire line trained, can be on wildfires, and have the specialty and the knowledge to help repair post-wildfire events. These suppression repair plans are developed by agency administrators and the IMT, which is the incident management team for the fire. They all work in coordination. So the plan outlines recommendations for fire suppression, repair, and rehabilitation. And READs monitor these rehabilitations throughout the fire. They're up there, they're kind of behind the scenes, but they do a heck of a lot of work, and they did so on the Grizzly Creek wildfire. They also provide guidance during the implementation of rehabilitation activities, and they coordinate with local specialists to identify potential impacts. So they are an interdisciplinary team, just like other groups we'll talk about here later. So suppression repair goals. Some of them are to minimize and mitigate suppression impacts. And that includes trying to not do something like don't put a dozer line there. If you can put it over here, that'll help us in the long run and help the resource in the long run. You want to minimize erosion and sediment transport. You want to maintain and restore historic drainage paths. You want to avoid and protect key watershed areas and wetlands. You want to protect, repair, and or mitigate damage to Forest Service infrastructure to the best of your abilities. These are just some photos of suppression repair, what's happening. So the photo on the left here, you've got some excavators with thumbs, and they are rehabbing a cat line or a dozer line, fairly wide dozer line. And basically some of the trees that were cut down to create the dozer line are then used to cover up the soil so you don't have exposed soils. So exposed soils are probably one of the leading candidates or contributors to post-wildfire erosion. This picture on the top left is a fire crew that would be mopping up. They're also doing some work for suppression repair, including mulching, once again, putting material down on exposed soils. They will also work with our forest ecologists to put down native seed to help vegetation come back where appropriate. So burned area emergency response, or BAER. What is BAER? So BAER is a program to identify imminent post-wildfire threats to human life, safety, property, and critical natural resources on national forest systems land, and then take immediate actions to manage any unacceptable risk to those resources. When does BAER occur? You have to look at a BAER on any fire greater than 500 acres. That's not to say we do a BAER on every fire that's 500 acres or greater. Some fires can be much larger. They could be in the wilderness or out in the backcountry where critical values other than natural resources are not present. And Mother Nature can do a heck of a job restoring these post-wildfire environments on our own. So that's one of the first criteria. Then there's critical values have to be present. These can be natural resources, infrastructure. I'll talk a little about that here in a second. BAER team, when do they mobilize? When do they come on? Well, they come once the fire's winding down, and the percentages vary, but I would say anywhere between 60 and 80% containment is when a BAER team mobilizes on a fire. And why is that? When a fire is in full-blown suppression efforts, you do not want to be there. It's very tough, it's very dangerous. So as the fire winds down, the BAER team ties in with the reads and the IMTs and can actually do their assessment. This is a rapid process. The assessment must be completed and funding requested within 7 days after fire containment. So BAER team, who is a BAER team? Well, it's composed of interdisciplinary team of the team lead, who was exactly that, the team lead, hydrologist, soil scientists, civil engineers, ecologists, biologists, archaeologists, recreation, and GIS professionals. This is the basic BAER process. So first is identify critical values, and I'll talk about that here, what are critical values in a second. Then we assess for threats to those critical values. We evaluate the risk. We develop a treatment prescription or a plan to mitigate the risk. And then finally, we implement the strategy. So critical values, what are they? Number one is life and safety. Not in any order after that is historical culture resources, property and infrastructure, and natural resources. So threats and risks, how are they? They're determined during the analysis. Examples can include flooding, erosion, sediment, debris flows, and invasive plant communities. This is a little chart that BAER teams use to kind of quickly analyze the probability or damage of loss to a critical value from very likely to unlikely, and then the magnitude of those consequences. And then if you're in the red categories of high to very high, that will receive a BAER treatment or recommended BAER treatment. If you're in intermediate, it's kind of a case by case. And if you're in the low, most likely that will not get a BAER treatment. That'll just be left to recover on its own. So going more into the BAER analysis, one of the first thing a BAER team has to do is create a soil burn severity map. And they do this using a burned area reflectance classification, or what we call the BARC. And the BARC is a satellite image that's provided by the BAER Imagery Support Program. And that's this image here to the right. That's the raw BARC image that is going to be validated and then created into a soil burn severity map. And I'll talk about that here in a bit. Once again, we identify those values at risk. The BAER team does the hydrologic and rainfall runoff modeling. The USGS does all the debris flow modeling. Then there's field evaluations for all the specialists who have individual reports that go into the final BAER report. And then there's treatment recommendations. So burned area classification is soil burn severity. This is the actual soil burn severity map for the Grizzly Creek wildfire. This is the city of Glenwood Springs down here in the lower left. This is the I-70 Colorado River corridor heading east as my cursor goes up, heading east towards Gypsum. What you see here, this is the created by the BAER team for this fire, and it indicates soil burn severity. And I'll talk here a bit about that in a minute. But red is indicating high soil burn severity. Yellow is moderate soil burn severity. This teal color is low soil burn severity, and the green is either very low soil burn severity or unburned. Oh, let me go back. So for the Grizzly Creek fire, 12% burned high, 43% moderate, 33% low, and the final 12% was either very low or unburned. So soil burn severity, we're going to talk quite a bit about this because it drives post-wildfire hydrologic response. It kind of is the key to what BAER teams use.
Steve?
So fire intensity and soil burn severity.
So sorry to interrupt you, Steve. We had a question.
Yeah.
We had a question.
Sure.
Do you mind going back one slide with your map? There was a question from Jeanette. Where in the map is Hanging Lake?
Hanging Lake. That's a good question. It's over here somewhere. And there's probably some resource person who knows it better than me. I haven't been up to Hanging Lake in years. I do know they did aerial flight reconnaissance. Most of you or many of you may have read in the paper, and it was amazing. It didn't get burned over. But they're going to do some mitigation, which I'll talk to later in the presentation, about burned areas above and adjacent to it.
Okay, thank you.
But once again, there's a mosaic, and that's very, very characteristic of wildfire.
Would you, sorry, Steve, one more follow-up question. Would you mind showing where like the no-name valley is and maybe?
Sure.
And
coming up, there'll be some delineated watersheds, and I can really show them with the outlines. Okay. But no name and Grizzly are right in this area right here.
Great.
So the northeast or northwestern portion of the fire. And there's probably some folks on the call who know this landscape a lot better than me. Chime in, so thanks for that. So fire intensity and soil burn severity. And soil burn severity, I'm going to talk a lot about. It drives post-wildfire hydrologic response, and a lot of what the BAER team does, this is kind of the thing that drives our analysis. So fire intensity and soil burn severity. So fire intensity is the energy or heat released during the consumption of organic matter, but that does not always indicate the fire's effects on soil. For instance, if you have a fast-moving fire that's moving through light fuels, it may not cause any damage to the soils or minimal damage. On the other side of that coin, if you have a very hot fire that has a long residence time, it can severely damage the soils. So here we go. On the top, you have some photos just to give you some context. This is a healthy unburned soil. You've got vegetation, healthy little A horizon here with roots and mass. This will infiltrate water and retain water. Here in the middle, you got a hydrologist and a soil scientist actually validating the bark to become that soil burn severity map that drives the analysis. And then here on the right, you've got high soil burn severity, thick ash, like something you'd take out of your fireplace. All the surface structure is destroyed, soil cover completely consumed, roots are just gone. And why all the talk of soil burn severity? Well, it drives and determines flood risk, rates of erosion, vegetative recovery, geologic response time, including debris flows, and threats to all downstream values at risk. Hydrophobicity. In a nutshell, this is water repellent soils, basically. This photo here shows some different from low to high burn severity and how that changes soil structure and how it reacts to water. The top photo over here is a USGS scientist using a soil infiltrometer here to determine how fast, or in this case, how slow water infiltrates into the soil profile. And down here, I don't know if you can see, there's a little drop of water. Another real simple test we use is we scrape away the ash layer, because ash will absorb water, and find that layer. And if you just use a water bottle and put a couple drops of water on that, and it beads up, it'll sit there for sometimes hours until it evaporates. It will not infiltrate at all. And this is really key, because basically what you have is a change situation where formerly you had vegetation and duff and a healthy soil profile. So water fell on the landscape, got infiltrated, got slowed down by that vegetation and duff, and now you've lost that. And then you add hydrophobic soils, which are basically a sheet of wax paper. So now there's nothing to slow the water down, and the soil is not infiltrating any of it. So basically, you take a sheet of wax paper in your kitchen and pour water on it versus pouring it on the sponge. That's kind of it in a nutshell. So hydrologic modeling for this fire, they modeled, this is the BAER team, modeled 14 watersheds, sub-watersheds. They ranged in size from just over 1,000 acres to just shy of 25,000 acres, Grizzly Creek. These are all watersheds that are in the Colorado River headwaters and associated tributaries. So Grizzly Creek burned approximately 14%, No Name Creek approximately 8%, and then other catchments were much smaller than those two. Those are the two largest, burned significantly greater percent-wise. So the team modeled for snowmelt and convective thunderstorms of various durations and intensities, and we modeled pre and post wildfire to see how those change. All burned watersheds indicated an increase in post-fire rainfall runoff response. Watershed response is driven by percent burned area or soil burn severity, especially in the moderate and high soil burn severity classes. And that's because those are the most likely to be hydrophobic. The two 25 and 100-year peak flows indicate increased volumes with reduced time of concentration. I'll explain that here momentarily. So here's that slide I was referring to earlier, showing the 14 delineated basins for this fire. Once again, here we have the city of Glenwood Springs to the lower left, I-70 and Colorado River corridor heading east as you go up to the right towards the town of Gypsum and Eagle. Here's the Grizzly Creek watershed for the person who was asking about that, and there's No Name adjacent to it. And while these are the two largest watershed, percent-wise, there's approximate percentage of, I believe, 14 and 8. You can see it's not a ton of the overall watershed, which is a good thing. But that doesn't mean that there's not potential for flooding and debris flows. And you can see here the other smaller sub-basins burned greater percentage-wise. So this is an example. This isn't specific from any of these watersheds. This is an example, but it's typical of what we see post-wildfire of modeled flow versus time. And on the x-axis, you have time in hours, and on the y-axis, you have flow in cubic feet per second. And I wouldn't focus on the numbers. I'd focus more on the hydrographs. And this pre-hydrograph is in black, post-wildfire hydrograph is in red. And what you see is a shift in both the volume of runoff coming off the post-burned environment, as well as a shift in that timing of time of concentration. And real basically, time of concentration you can think of as water at the top of a watershed, the time it takes to get to the watershed outlet. That's the simplest way to look at it. So basically what you see here is you're going to have a greater amount of runoff, and the time of concentration, or the time it takes for that water and sediment to reach that outlet, has shifted to the left, which means it's reduced. So we initially had maybe a little over an hour, 65 minutes. You're now about 35 minutes. So you're going to have a greater amount of volume of material coming down the drainage, any drainage, in a shorter amount of time. And once again, that's based on soil burn severity and other basin parameters. So BAER implementation, you want to develop a response strategy. So BAER can be looked at in two phases. There's the analysis, that rapid 7-day assessment, and then it's followed by the implementation. Those BAER teams can be the same, they can be different, Implementation can take up to a year after the containment of the fire, but the BAER assessment develops that response strategy that's handed off to the implementation team. So number one strategy is natural recovery. Mother Nature has been doing with this for millennia. She does a heck of a job at doing it. It's a natural process. And where nature can do it on her own and there's no critical resources of homes or life and safety, we choose that course of action. Closures and warnings, these may be longer term or temporary. This warning sign to the right, many of you may have seen this. This is from the Lake Christine wildfire. You'll probably see some of these up on Grizzly Creek this summer. And basically it's to warn, or not warn per se, but give Forest Service users to say, hey, you're entering a changed environment. You may have been hunting, camping, and hiking this for the last 20 years, but you're entering a changed landscape and just have a heightened sense of awareness that things are going to be different. Treatments, we have a ton. There's a BAER or BAER catalog, treatment catalog, but all of the treatments, whatever the team chooses, have to be proven effective. They have to substantially reduce the risk in the first year. They have to require minimal action. They have to be economically justified, and they need to be completed before the next damaging storm event, which in a lot of these fires are either snowmelt or convective summertime thunderstorms. BAER proposed treatments for the Grizzly Creek fire. This is just a very small touch on it. It would take a half an hour just to go through what they're doing on this fire. But they include land treatments. Noxious weeds is a big one on almost every wildfire that I've worked on. And there's a program called Early Detection Rapid Response, EDRR. The ecologists are much more familiar with it than I, but basically they go in there to basically contain noxious weeds to make sure that the natural vegetation community comes back and doesn't get overrun with invasive species. Road and trail treatments are a big one. Treatments will aim to reduce risk of damage from elevated post-fire runoff on trails by improving the number and efficiency of drainage features along segments of the roads and trails. Many of you have been on roads and trails in the Forest Service, and we have little roadside culvert ditch relief pipes, 18 to 12-inch corrugated metal pipes that will by no way means be able to convey a post-wildfire flood event. So we armor roads and provide engineering methods and hardening to allow the floods to bypass roads and trails without basically ripping them out. There's also protection and safety. So we'll have warning signs, both on roads and trails, as well as recreational signs in recreational and campsites. There's also rockfall mitigation. CDOT's doing a bunch of that, but we're doing some above Hanging Lake. And there's also monitoring, and there's long-term monitoring, which we'll talk about, but there's also monitoring storm patrol. So after storm events, snowmelt runoff, part of the BAER implementation team will go out there to make sure that treatments are functioning the way they were designed, and if they need to be altered or changed. This, I want to give a shout out to Dennis Staley and his group. The US Geological Survey Landslide Hazards Program does all the debris flow modeling for BAER teams across the United States. That is not done in-house by BAER. We provide our models to them and the soil burn severity, and then they do the debris flow modeling. So some key points the USGS, US Geological Survey, wanted you guys to know about is post-wildfire debris flows can be generated multiple times in these areas at moderate rainfall intensities. They provide estimates of debris flow likelihood, magnitude, combined hazard at certain rainfall thresholds. Steep burn watersheds in the Glenwood Canyon and its tributaries, No Name Creek and Grizzly Creek, may have elevated debris flow susceptibility for several years following wildfire. Significant events have occurred here. This is a debris flow that occurred after the tragic 1994 Storm King fire that closed I-70, buried some roads, and you see a pretty good chunk of alluvial mud there in the Colorado River. Here's another shot of that debris flow. There was also several debris flows from the coal seam fire just to the west of the Storm King fire. And most of you who live in this section of Colorado know that even without fire, we've seen moderate debris flows close I-70 at times from convective summertime thunderstorms. So the debris flow likelihood model, where, magnitude model, how big, and then they look at certain rainfall thresholds, duration, and intensities that would trigger these debris flows. So this is a map of the likelihood of debris flows. And what you can see here, there's lines, which are channel segment probabilities, and then these polygons that are sub-watersheds, which are the basin probabilities. These darker colors in the oranges and reds and dark maroons, those are higher probability areas for the likelihood of a debris flow to occur. This is the estimated volume. So what they're looking at is a volume of material in these watersheds in cubic meters. And most of these are in this dark orange and yellow. And those are high volumes of cubic material. You're looking at anywhere in the yellow from 1,000 to 10,000 cubic meters. And in these orange areas, 10,000 to 100,000. So there's a lot of material there that could be transported in a debris flow. And then they combine those maps, they kind of overlay them. So once again, they give you the likelihood, they give you the volume, and then they give you the risk. So here it's showing, these are the first map, these are the likelihoods from 0 to 100%. These are those volumes of cubic material. So for example, if you have a low probability and a low volume, you fall into a low risk category. On the other hand, if you're a high probability and you have the material to transport, to initiate these debris flows, you get pushed into a high risk category. And they do that for a number of different rainfall durations and intensities. Take-home messages from the GS. These debris flows can occur within minutes of intense rain and repeatedly after the fire. This elevated hazard can persist several years following a fire. This region has a history of producing dangerous debris flows at moderate, i.e. 1 year recurrence intervals. Basically, that's a not too intense, not too long, not a real significant storm, something we see quite often in this area. And once again, they look at the likelihood, the magnitude, the combined hazard at certain rainfall thresholds. What threshold, what duration and intensity will potentially trigger these post-wildfire debris flows. I know that was a ton, and it's tough to, especially in a PowerPoint virtually, to see that. Here's some links, and I'll make sure Christina gets these on the website so you can visit them. And these are Dennis and his group out of Golden. You can get on there. You can look at Lake Christine. You can look at Grizzly Creek. You can look at any fire across the West. It also has some great data where you can kind of learn about the science and what you're looking at. So with that, if you are interested in that, these are a couple links you can get in and dive in deeper. Additional resources. So earlier I mentioned BAER, we look at Forest Service values at risk. Well, what if I'm not on Forest Service land, but I have values at risk? I'm downstream, I'm the town of Basalt, I'm I-70, I'm a residence. Well, that's where the NRCS, or Natural Resource Conservation Services Emergency Watershed Protection Program, or EWP, comes into play. So NRCS administers this program, which is designed to relieve imminent hazards to life and safety caused by natural disasters, including wildfire. Who does EWP help? Well, it applies to all non-federal lands, private property, state, municipal, and tribal lands. It was utilized by the town of Basalt for the Lake Christine wildfire, and it's being utilized currently by the city of Glenwood Springs for this wildfire, Grizzly Creek. It requires a local sponsor. Sponsors could be state and local governments, Indian tribes, tribal organizations, and other special government entities. What do they provide? What does EWP provide? provides 75% of construction costs, technical assistance, including planning, environmental compliance, project design, construction management, and quality assurance. Some typical recovery measures include upland erosion control, a biggie in post-wildfire environments, flood diversions, structure protection, sediment control, debris removal, and stream bank protection. So now we're going to move on to long-term restoration, managing for natural recovery. And that's kind of the Forest Service motto, managing for natural recovery. And this is what you'll see on most wildfires. You'll see green up, hopefully natural stuff and not invasives on many of these wildfires. It's a pretty cool thing.
Steve, can I interrupt for just a moment?
You betcha.
Okay, I just typed in a question from kind of a personal standpoint, because I live in No Name. I was looking at the maps. Does the No Name Canyon fall into that 80 to 100% risk category? I wasn't sure if the red that I was seeing was going down into the Grizzly Canyon, or if that would go down into the No Name Canyon.
I would have to go back and look at it and pull it up. And it's interactive on the USGS website, and I've played around with it. But it's not interactive on my PowerPoint. Let me just see real quick. Because you're talking here.
Yeah.
And what, I don't have I can turn on the USGS, you can turn on the delineated basins. But here I can't. So I'm not, somebody might know, but yeah, there's high risk in this little section, in this little section.
So if you go over, like the farthest over to the left.
Right here.
And the red that's down below that, even further east.
This little red.
Oh, sorry,
here.
west. Yeah, that's it.
West, this guy.
You were just at it before.
To the west, these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that according to their models, and these have to be taken, they're not 100%, they're like anything. You have to take, there's uncertainty in these things. And you have to understand that. These are exceptionally small, but what I would say, if your residence is near here, or you recreate near here, or you have, I would get on those links, because you can actually zoom in here, and then you can overlay, you can download these, I believe, as KMZ files, and then drop them on Google Earth. And then you can actually see where in real time, because this doesn't, at least for me, because I live in Carbondale, doesn't help me a great deal.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if that helped you.
And Steve, just to clarify, that website is available for anybody to be able to look at and operate in. Is that correct? The US?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. That was from a public presentation. And I just hopped on that link just the other day just to make sure. So it should be, if you have any issues with that, let me know and I can chime in with Dennis. So I think I went over that slide. So long-term restoration, U.S. Forest Service, what are they doing? So they're monitoring, long-term monitoring stream health, soil health and recovery, because that's key, grass and forb communities, including the invasive vegetation, road and trail conditions, and overall ecosystem health. These things are pretty amazing because they're like giant living labs. You can really see what wildfire, the benefits that come from wildfire, and also the things you need to deal with. Ongoing research. So the U.S. Geological Service, USGS, they not only do all of our debris flow modeling for BAER teams across the country, they wanted to do some research specific to this fire. And that was kind of cool. So I'll talk about that. And then Utah State University's Water Research Laboratory out of Logan is also doing research currently on the Grizzly Creek burn scar. So the USGS and Dennis and his team, once again, were great. They set a bunch of instrumentation, including rain gauges and soil measuring devices all throughout the fire, mainly up high. And what they're doing is they're monitoring and modeling and looking for early warning support and advancement of post-wildfire debris flow science focused on that rainfall intensity or threshold. And this is something you could do a graduate degree course on. So I'm going to kind of hit it at the 30,000 foot view. But basically, those rainfall thresholds they use to initiate post-wildfire debris flows, they're trying to narrow that in. So does that X duration, X intensity storm trigger a debris flow or not? And that's what they're trying to push a needle ahead on the research they're doing on this fire. They're working in coordination with the National Weather Service, who many of you have seen probably on Lake Christine and other wildfires, who issue flash flood warnings on these burn scars when they see a radar blip that has a certain intensity or duration storm coming. So these guys are focused on looking at threshold duration, threshold intensity, and how that relates to the triggering of debris flows in a post-wildfire environment. Utah State researchers, they're doing similar but different. They're looking specifically at rainfall runoff and sediment dynamics. So they're looking to understand the prediction in post-wildfire rainfall runoff responses across the burned watershed. They're exploring fundamental hydrologic processes after a wildfire, and they're modeling and assessing post-wildfire sediment dynamics. Some of their key research questions include, how does post-wildfire rainfall runoff response vary across a burned watershed? How does rainfall runoff response evolve through time, beginning and following upstream immediately after a wildfire? And what underlying scale-dependent watershed and burn characteristics affects this response both through space and time? These are some of the photos. The one here on the left, top left, that's Grizzly Creek. They have instrumentation in both live streams and other stream channels. And they're mainly looking, like I said, at stream flow or rainfall runoff response and sediment dynamics post-wildfire. So it's pretty cool that we have one of the preeminent federal research groups in the USGS and a pretty solid academic group working to push the needle forward on science and research on our fire right here in our own backyard for some of us. But this will help fires across the Western United States. So in summary, Grizzly Creek fire affected many people and communities. Many of these same people and communities are working on these post-fire efforts. This burn scar may produce flash flooding, debris flows, and rockfall in coming years. It's a changed landscape, as I had mentioned. And this PowerPoint or this presentation was by in no means inclusive of all the work that's occurring and will continue to occur on this fire. CWCB, for those of that's the Colorado Water Conservation Board, the City of Glenwood Springs, CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation, the state, numerous other nonprofits, Warren Forest Conservancy, and others are all working on this, U.S. Forest Service included. So hats off to them. I'm presenting a lot of work that was done by other people. So I want to give a shout out to those, the firefighters and all the support that we saw during Grizzly Creek. Hats off to those men and women. Then some folks, Liz Roberts and Michael Broadus from the White River National Forest right here in Glenwood, Jim Janung from UCR Fire and Rifle, Kara Farr from the National Office, National BAER Coordinator, Dennis Staley from the USGS, Stephen Jallin right here, NRCS in Glenwood, and Dr. Belize Lane and Haley Chatham, who's a PhD student at Utah State. And with that, I will try to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Steve. There's a lot going on, not even just with the Grizzly Creek fire, but it seems like with every wildfire. And just thank you and for the team that makes this all possible. We do have a couple of questions for you, so let me just scroll back through the chat box here. The first question we have is from Dana McGlone, and the question is, are there rain gauges over the burn area? And if so, where, and are they available to the public?
That's a great question. The answer is yes, they are. They are GPSed by the folks, including the research organizations. They will be, I think, made public You can actually get on like the USGS now and look at the gauges that are up on Lake Christine. So I think in time they'll be made public. They're not hiding them. I mean, if they get damaged, they'll replace them, but they're all over. They are GPS, the rain gauges, everything's GPS. Otherwise you could never find it again. But they'll probably be online. If they're short duration, they probably won't put them online, but for the longer duration, they should be available for the public.
Great, thank you. Okay, here's your next question from Julie Pranger. Do the debris flow models for the Grizzly Creek fire include rock debris and rock fall potential, or only soil?
That's a good question. I'm pretty, and once again, I'm an engineer and hydrologist, not a landslide post, guy, but I'm pretty sure it's the former. It doesn't include rockfall. Rockfall is a different component. I don't know, CDOT has experts in rockfall mitigation that are more like geologists, geologic engineers, but I'm pretty confident that the debris flow does not include rockfall.
Does not include rockfall. Okay.
Does not include rockfall. But rockfall, as many of you know, and for those of you who are from out of state, this canyon is very susceptible to rockfall. It's a very steep, very rugged canyon that has interstate highway, a railroad, and the Colorado River all running through it. And for those of us who live here on the western slope of Colorado, I-70 has been closed due to rockfall, every couple of years. That's something that happens outside of wildfire.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Next question is from Greg. And his question is the city of Glenwood Springs or Garfield County the, quote, sponsoring agency for private properties in No Name? Because it sounds like NRCS has been out with landowners along No Name Creek.
That's a great question, and it would be one to either ask the NRCS office in Glenwood Springs or Garfield County. I just didn't work with them. I know that Basalt was a sponsoring agency for the Lake Christine wildfire. If somebody's on from Garfield County or from the city of Glenwood, who knows, maybe they'll chime in, but I don't know that question or the answer to that question.
Let me scan real quick just to see if anybody is saying anything. Okay, I don't see anybody that's responded directly to that. So I'm gonna go on to the next question and maybe someone will respond in the meantime. I can't tell who this is from because it's a couple of different letters here, but suppression repair question. Can Steve identify the status of significant fire lines on the Grizzly Creek fire, in particular the line on the backside of Lookout Mountain above the Red Canyon and Cattle Creek drainages?
I cannot. That's something we could definitely find out. I know the crews, so I worked full-time for the Forest Service for years, and now I don't. If I still did, I could probably be like, yeah, I know exactly. So I would have to defer to my colleagues that are at the Forest Service. I work as a kind of an on-call. I'll be, getting ready for 2021 fire season to work with the agency, but I don't know that off. But they prioritize those, and there's a hierarchy, which ones are more critical than others. But I know they're rehabbing them all. But I can guarantee you this, that not close to rehabbing them all, because what happens is they didn't even get containment. I don't even know if Grizzly's 100% contained, even though it is, I think. I don't know if they've called it that. It was 91% contained in mid-December. So by the time they get contained on these fires, you run into snow, frozen soils, frost, winter. You don't have a ton of time to get the work done. So they're probably going to be hitting the ground hard in spring and summer of 2021 to do a lot of that rehab that wasn't accomplished in 2020.
So they call the Forest Service, that someone should be able to answer that for them. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah. Liz Roberts is she's the BAER coordinator, and she was the lead breed and on the BAER team on this fire. And if you can't, shoot me an email and I'll see if I can track down that information.
Okay, so we have a question from Jeanette. I know this talk is on Grizzly, but I'm curious how this compares to the Lake Christine fire in relation to the occurrence of debris flow after fire impacts. I ask in wondering what to expect in comparison for this fire damaged area. I'm pretty sure you worked on that Lake Christine fire too, Steve. So.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time. I spent the entire summer on 5 fires, and one was Lake Christine. That was the biggest fire I think I worked on. Not the biggest fire size-wise, but complexity-wise. And that's a great question. We did a lot of work, and there's a lot of instrumentation on that fire because you have a lot of critical values that are not on Forest Service, town of Basalt, residences, businesses downstream of this. What happens? It's also a tough question to answer, and I'll tell you why. Exposed soils, those are things we can control, trying to regain and restore historic drainage paths and buffering and mulching and vegetating. Those are all things in our control. And we did a lot of great work on Lake Christine, and there's going to be a lot of continued great work on Grizzly Creek. The one thing we don't have in our control, which is one of the biggest, if not biggest driver, is the storms. And it's the storm duration and intensity. And we would sit there, the BAER team, well after we were wrapped up, and just watch every cell that even came close to that burn scar to see what it did. And it really never received any monstrous storms. There was one storm, and many of you who live in the valley may recall, it was actually on the front side, on the very steep stuff, and it was, I think it was at 0.8 of an inch in 60 minutes, which is a significant cell, but it was a very small cell. It was not completely on the burn scar, and it caused mud flow, not massive, but down onto roads just above the salt. There was some fire debris, so I think it was on the edge, but there was never a rainfall event that parked itself over the Lake Christine wildfire to cause. So we kind of dodged it. Now we're coming into our 3rd year, and that 3 to 5 year category is kind of the magic number when things start to stabilize after a wildfire. So if we see another drought this year, which it's looking likely unless things dramatically change, and we don't see a large amount of those high intensity, short duration convective summertime thunderstorms or any significant rain on snow events or big meltdown, it's really, that's one of those events is what's going to determine something occurring on any fire scar. The thing with Grizzly Creek is, up top, it's pretty flat, but the canyons dropping into the Colorado River and whatnot, a lot of those roots that were holding up rocks and soil and structure are basically now, some of them are burned and gone. So it may not take a significant rainfall event, as the USGS mentioned in their modeling, to cause some debris flow.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, I think I froze for a second. Okay, so we have a question from, I think, Dale Taylor. Do you, maybe he's referring to us, but do you or you guys, but do you or any other organization monitor the air quality from the smoke produced from the fires locally and mitigate the damage?
So speaking for the U.S. Forest Service, and I'm not, they do have, literally, they have specialists, Forest Service specialists that do focus on air quality and work with basically, in this case, they probably work with CDPHE, which is the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, to send out warnings. So they would have worked with communities, because a wildfire, and everybody knows this, you can be 4 communities away or half the state away, and depending on the wind, direction, and strength, you can be dramatically affected, have dramatically affected air quality. So there are specialists that focus on air quality and are part of the incident management team on most fires in the Western United States.
Steve, just a follow-up question to that, because I know even we were impacted in Basalt, where our office is located last summer. And so we very easily use the Purple Air app that I know a lot of other people use as well. Are the instruments that USGS has, are those available to the public that we could use as well? Or do you have another website that you could refer people, like the public, to when they're monitoring air quality for personal reasons?
I would have to look at it because that's out of my purview.
Okay.
I'm always just choking down smoke, looking at the ground. But Well, there's folks I could ask around, or we could contact the Forest Service. But that's a great question. I know that on the kind of the hydrologic post-fire response to brief flow side of things, and many of you saw this on Lake Christine. It's done around the Western United States, where the National Weather Service, in tandem with the USGS and BAER teams, will trigger a warning looking at a hot cell that's coming in across a burn scar, and that'll trigger a flash flood warning on their website. But then it'll also come up if you're signed up on Garfield Alert or Pitkin Alert or Eagle Alert in our counties. Folks outside your local county, comes up on your iPhone as an alert. So that they have for kind of the flooding and debris flow. I don't know about air quality. I'd imagine they do, but I'd have to look into that.
Okay. Okay, you ready for more questions, Steve? There's a lot of questions coming in.
I'm ready.
Okay, this one is from Dave Rogers. Okay, over the past 15 or so years, pine beetles have infested forests in the western United States and killed trees over large areas. Wildfires are one natural way to reduce or eliminate beetles, but at a tremendous cost to the fire. Were parts of the Grizzly Creek fire beetle infested? If yes, did this make the area more susceptible to fire propagation and damage? Will there be a study to assess the impact of fire on likely future beetle migration and beetle kill? Hold on, I have a couple more questions. Do BAER teams also evaluate pine beetle kill in forests, the impact, risk, treatments, etc.? And are there studies of the number, size, intensity, and effectiveness of fires to limit beetle kill in forests?
Okay, that was a lot.
That was a lot. Let me know if you can repeat anything.
No, beetle kill,
Good questions.
that's great. And I know when I first started with the agency, beetle kill was a big thing on our radar. I mean, the White River National Forest here, the headquarters in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, has been fairly lucky with regards to beetle kill compared to other forests north of us, like in the Route National Forest. And in the northern Colorado, southern Wyoming, the red and the dead, they call it, and you can just see swaths of that tree. We even have some of that over in Summit County, Colorado. I don't know, that is not my specialty. I don't remember hearing there was a large amount of beetle kill in this fire's footprint. That's not to say there wasn't. I don't think it was a large component if it was. But once again, I'm not an ecologist who focuses on that. Secondly, with regards to BAER teams, and maybe some of my BAER colleagues will call me out on this, but in the 10 years I've been on BAER, we deal more with hazard trees and mitigation of hazard trees, because now you've got a bunch of dead trees standing, and then you've got Colorado winds, soils and times and trails now, so we're very focused on hazard trees. I don't think BAER teams focus on bark beetle trees per se. That said, if you're doing restoration efforts and there's a bunch of live or dead bark beetle trees that didn't get burned, they're adjacent to some treatment you would be proposing, I think any BAER team would take that into consideration for sure. But BAER teams get caught on a fire after it's burning. They're not, there's, just in the White River alone, there's over 2.3 million acres. So to evaluate every one, so that's an answer for the BAER team question. And I think as far as reports and research on it, I think it's fairly voluminous. I think there's a ton of top-end scientists, PhD level scientists, working on the pine beetle, the spruce beetle, what they're doing in different areas, how we can combine that or combat that, and how with climate change and with wildfire seasons extending longer, they're very aware of it. We're very aware of it. And you could Google it, or, I'm sure between the USGS, US Forest Service research stations in academia, you can find a ton on that very subject.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Okay, this next question is from our neighbor upstream, from Larry Howe. Larry is in Grand Lake, and our hearts were with you all up there this summer too. So he was following the East Troublesome Fire and is wondering if the National Park System's response is different from U.S. Forest Service response, or do you have similar patterns of?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we're all very similar. So the BAER is kind of an interdisciplinary thing, kind of like interagency fire teams, which is U.S. Forest Service, BLM, BIA, and National Park Service. So I think we have probably little nuances, that each agency deals with. But I think overall, we follow the same type of guidelines. I'm pretty confident that the Park Service and Bureau of Indian Affairs and BLM all use the burn area severity to kind of guide the analysis. We're all doing hydrologic modeling, probably, relatively the same. Those models, different models are used in different parameters based on where you are. So for a chaparral forest fire in California, those models use different models than we'll use here in Colorado, maybe different models up in northern Montana, northern Rockies. So, but I think to answer your question, yeah, they're very similar, but they might have some little things, nuances based on the agency and agency guidelines and regulations.
Great, that's a great question, Larry. Thank you for bringing that up. And if you need, by the way, Larry, and if anybody else is on this call from Grand Lake, I'm sure Steve would be happy if he knows the person that's leading the BAER effort up there. Maybe we could help put you in touch with them to get any more specific questions answered about that fire in particular. I'm just going to move down the list here. Adrian has a comment speaking from something you talked about earlier. Speaking from his geo background, I would think that debris flows do include rocks and soil, but may not refer to isolated rockfall events. So thank you for that. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, Steve.
No, just that I'm not a geologist or a geologist.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
I do, I got to spend a week plus with the USGS guys up there on Grizzly Creek this summer. And if you have specific questions like that, I can probably get you in touch with them to answer it, because I took I think undergraduate geology class. So I'm not the guy to ask that question, but I can get you in touch with the smart people who know the answer.
We do work with quite a collaboration of different professionals, which is really pretty incredible. Yeah. Okay, we have a question, you have a question from Greg. With different land characteristics of between the Lake Christine and the Grizzly Creek fire, is there any insight into reseeding? And it sounds like he's been told with the Grizzly Creek being more rocky and steep, it would not be as effective. Reseeding wouldn't be as effective and possibly also be dangerous to put volunteers on the ground, within the canyon there. Yeah,
once again, I'm going to, fall back on my hydrologic engineer, hydrologist card, but I do and have worked on numerous wildfires in BAER and resource advisor capacity with the forest ecologist, and that's her specialty. They use natural seed. They try to eradicate, get a real head start on any invasives before they just proliferate where they can't control them in an economical and concise manner. Grizzly Creek is a much more, just being up there, there's some country I never even knew about. It is rough terrain. It was rough for firefighters. It's been rough for everybody involved as far as the terrain. Great question. I don't think the Forest Service or anybody else for that matter is going to put people in harm's way to revegetate areas. They would probably look into doing something like aerial reseeding using fixed wing or rotary wing aircraft, versus trying to put people in some of those places, because I've been there and they're not fun. And it is rocky. So was Lake Christine, but Lake Christine does not have that vertical relief like Grizzly Creek Canyon does, or the whole fire burn scar.
I think this is also a good opportunity for me to mention that Roaring Fork Conservancy is really honored to be part of the Glenwood Canyon Restoration Alliance. And so for some people that are just hearing about that group right now, I just want to read this to you from their website so that I don't get it wrong. It's a collaboration of local government, nonprofit, and business partners created in response to the August 2020 Grizzly Creek fire. And really the purpose is to renew community and landscape through collective action. And due to the scale and destruction, and we anticipate restoration will be lengthy and difficult. And we, our educators at the Conservancy, have also been helping develop some education around potential impacts to the Colorado River, right? Because in addition to the Grizzly Creek fire being on the Colorado River, you know, you already heard from our neighbors up in Grand Lake that East Troublesome fire burned at the headwaters of the Colorado River. And then we had the Pine Gulch fire. I'm pretty sure I'm remembering that was the name of it, down towards Grand Junction, Tibet Canyon. Yep. That was further down on the Colorado River. So we had 3 significant fires in the upper Colorado River basin last summer. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think we're all sort of like holding our breath a little bit. We really need rain because we're in a drought, and at the same time we're like, you know, what could potentially happen. But we are developing some of that educational material right now, and we're actually also, in addition to that, making it available not just to the general public, and tourists, but also to the whitewater rafting guides and the outfitters that, you know, make a pretty significant living on the Colorado River. And, you know, we're really dependent on our rivers staying healthy in order to be able to recreate on them, both for the rafting piece, but also for the fisheries and also as a drinking water supply. So just wanted to plug that in there for folks that might be interested in getting involved with the Glenwood Canyon Restoration Alliance. And you can look that up. Just if you do a Google search, you'll be able to find it pretty easily. We have a comment here from Adrian. It sounds like Jason Siebold at Colorado State University has published a lot of great scientific articles regarding pine beetles related to forest health, climate change, and wildfire. And just an FYI, I've tried to get him to be one of our Watershed Institute speakers. So I'm going to try to track him down for next year so that we can get some of those questions answered, because I know he's done a lot of work with pine beetles also in response to all the avalanches we've been having. Well, we had a couple of winters ago. So it'd be really good to get him here to talk to us a little bit about that impact as well. But we have a question from Heather. Is there ever a need for landscape architects or land planners to get involved with the response efforts? And if so, how would we get plugged into those efforts? I wonder if maybe I just answered that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And they are plugged in. So going back all the way to Reeds in the suppression repair and in BAER. So they're multi-interdisciplinary teams. And basically those teams, who they bring in and the size of those teams is based upon the fire's size and complexity. So some fires may be a very small Reed team, a very small BAER team because it's a small fire and it's not that complex. Others, these big, literally called complexes out in California that are 400,000 acres. You know, these are dozens of people, dozens of specialists. The Forest Service and the BLM actually has landscape architects and planners. So they don't go outside looking for additional resources. They do work with communities. The Forest Service, I know, worked with Town of Assault and Eagle County, and they're working with City of Glenwood Springs and Garfield County. So they do work with other agencies and private land. You know, they do share data and resources, but they don't, in my knowledge, I've never seen it go out and say, hey, you know, throw an ad in the paper for a post-wildfire landscape architect. For folks that have worked for the agency and who leave the agency and you want to remain in wildfire and wildfire science, like myself, you come on as what is called an AD, administratively determined, and you work for the agency. I don't know if that answers your question. I mean, if you want to be a landscape architect on a BAER team, you pretty much need to get a job with the United States Forest Service or BLM or Park Service or BIA. And that said, just okay. On that, there's a lot of resources out there that do assist, kind of like the Conservancy, where you can lend your skills, and there are third-party consultants that do work in that longer-term restoration. But once again, that you would have to tie in with like a nonprofit or the local government or resource. I've never seen the feds bring somebody from the outside in necessarily.
Okay, let's see. We have one more down here. Heather says, thank you. I think you just answered all the questions that were in the chat box. So if somebody asked a question and I didn't get to it, please send me a quick note. Oh, we just got a new question. Status question on recreational resources in Glenwood Canyon, including the bike path, mountain biking, Forest Hollow Trail, and hiking. Will they be available this summer, and how might they be impacted by debris flow issues?
Another great question, and one that for individual trails and what they're doing, you know, the bike path, I believe, is owned or in the CDOT right of way. So that's under CDOT's jurisdiction. I know they're working with the Forest Service, and the Forest Service is working with them. You know, I haven't heard of any long-term closures yet, but that doesn't mean to say there won't be. I think if you get on the White River National website, National Forest website, they're going to have updated of all the status of all those closed. And they will also have stuff that's not in their jurisdiction. So they'll have, yeah, Glenwood Canyon bike path is expected to be closed. I know that currently, if things remain in situ and kind of stable, that things will be open and they'll monitor it. So if we have big significant rain events, they may shut down stuff, you know, and I think CDOT may do that. If they know significant rainfall is coming in from the National Weather Service that's going to park itself over this burn scar, they're going to be very watchful of that for the safety of the traveling public on I-70. So I think it's going to be, we're going to learn a lot this summer, but I think the best resource for answering those questions is get on the National Forest, White River National Forest website.
Great. Well, Steve, we can't thank you enough. I mean, this is really good and really informative. Maybe in a year or so, we'll have you come back and you can give us a little update on what you all have been seeing with the different projects that you've been running. Or maybe we can get some of your colleagues from Utah State or USGS to present on what they've been finding. Just to remind everybody, this presentation was recorded tonight and we will have it available on our website. Steve was also kind enough to share his PowerPoint slides with us right before we turned on tonight. So that will also be available on our website. And I really want to invite everybody to continue to stay engaged with the Grizzly Creek post-fire watershed response. If you're anywhere in the state of Colorado, at the very least, you drive that I-70 corridor. So you might be impacted by what could happen either this summer or it sounds like within the next, you know, up to 10 years or so, if not longer. And so it's just good for all of us to just be aware, especially if we're traveling that corridor or if you're recreating on the river there as well. So I also want to invite you to stay tuned to our website at roaringfork.org/events to find out about future Brookshire Watershed Institute presentations. We do have one more coming up that's part of this fall series, which is on March 10th, and that's going to be with Carl Wettlaufer. He is the state hydrologist with NRCS and the snow surveyor, and he's going to be presenting on monitoring mountain snowpack for water supply forecasting and beyond. And when he's with us on the evening of March 10th, he is actually going to already have the spring river outlook. And so it'll be interesting for all of us to hear what they're forecasting given what the snowpack is around the state. And then what we decided to do is the very next day, so Thursday, March 11, as a little follow-up to Carl's presentation, we're going to have with Megan and one of our colleagues at NRCS in Glenwood is going to lead a SNOTEL site tour on the Thursday, March 11th. But we only have spots for 8 people just because we have to be careful with how many we bring due to COVID. So if you're even remotely interested, I encourage you to go register tonight if it's not already full. So you get to watch Carl Wednesday night, Thursday night, we get in the field with us. You get to dig a snow pit, go see a SNOTEL site, use a snow tube and actually monitor the snow water equivalent and, you know, do a little forecasting of your own in person with our experts. So if there isn't any other questions, I don't know, Megan, if you have any other questions, or Steve, if there's anything else you want to add, I think we can go ahead and wrap up the night. Do you have any?
I would just say thank you to the Roaring Fork Conservancy. Thanks for everybody for spending some time with us tonight to learn about one of our other local fires. And I think the state of Colorado is now becoming well versed in this, but I don't know with any better people or communities to deal with these things. So I'm pretty confident we'll all weather the storm. And I'll give a shout out. Carl's great, so definitely hit him up on that presentation. And thanks for coming.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you so much, Steve. And thanks everybody else. Megan, did you have any more questions?
I don't, no.
Okay. Have a great night, everybody. And Steve, thank you again, and great to see you. Great to see so many.
Thanks, guys. Great seeing you. Hope to see you all in person soon.
Yep. Good night.